Eurovision doesn't have the monopoly on the things that we love about it, the community and the music and the camp entertainment factor. We can get those things elsewhere if we want to.
Hello and welcome to the EuroWhat, episode 286, dropping on December 30th, 2025. We are a pair of Americans trying to make sense of our future with the Eurovision Song Contest. I'm Mike McComb, and I'm here with my co-host, Ben Smith. Hey, Ben.
Hey, Mike.
In this episode, we'll be talking about New Year, New Me, New Special Interest with our special guest from the University of Helsinki, Dr. Zoë Jay. Welcome back to the show, Zoë.
Hi, thanks for having me back.
How has your Eurovision experience been recently with all of the news and the changes and such?
Wow, I don't have a good answer for that because I think, like a lot of people, it has been a rough time. And in some ways, for me, maybe that was a little easier because people who maybe have listened to previous episodes of your podcast know that I stepped back from watching the contest back in 2024, but I have still been obviously following along and talking to people who are still following it. So I am not disentangled from all of the everything that is going on. So it has been, I don't know, I guess I'm just sad is probably the basic emotion. It just sucks, man.
Yeah. I think that's kind of where we are sitting as well, even though like I think a lot of people were expecting things to kind of get to this point, but even knowing that is on the horizon doesn't make it any less doesn't lessen the impact when you actually reach that point on the horizon. Going into your research, the last time that you were on the show, you were telling us about the Eurovisionaries Project and the research that you are continuing to do. Have there been any additional insights that have developed since the last time we spoke?
Yeah, so I've done a second round of focus groups and interviews. I did those back in July 2025. I've now spoken to fans from over the last 2 years of the contest, and I really appreciate everyone who took the time to talk to me about that. It was extremely helpful and like quite raw material a lot of the time. So I really appreciate everyone who spoke to me about it. But what that means, I guess, is that I've got some very interesting material from people about how they have changed with their relationship to the contest over time. For example, we've got a lot of people who in 2024, I think, were hoping that the contest would right itself after a little bit of a rocky year. It was really unclear for months whether Israel would be expelled and whether anything would happen. And so a few people boycotted, but a lot of people were hoping that the contest would go back to what we were used to it being. And again, I think leading up to 2025, a lot of people were hoping for that same thing. And then in the summer, we had all of these movements with Slovenia and Spain and Ireland and a few other countries calling for investigations. And so there was a lot of hope that I think people were really clinging to, and understandably I was as well. And then we have what's happened instead. And so a lot of that hope has been dashed. So I think it's quite sad.
I agree.
Yeah.
And you're based in Finland. How has the coverage been like in Finland? Because Finland was also raising a number of concerns and was one of the last Nordic countries to indicate what their plans were going to be for 2026.
Yeah, Finland raised a lot of concerns about the technical production of the contest. I think they were quite concerned about the way that the costs have been ballooning and about the way that artists are being treated, although they didn't specifically say anything about Israel's participation in public. And so, to my knowledge, I don't know what they've said behind the scenes, but they haven't commented on that aspect of it. In the general public, there is a lot of discussion about it. It's in the forefront of a lot of people's minds. Then there's quite a significant gap, I think, between the general public view that Israel probably shouldn't be participating in the contest and that Finland should probably be doing what it did when Russia was going to participate and threatening to withdraw, And there's a bit of gap between that expectation from the general public and what the broadcaster is actually doing.
I feel like I have said multiple times in the last couple of years as we have been navigating this Eurovision environment, this is why it's important to diversify your fandom portfolio, so that if like one piece of that does something like this, you are not left maybe completely emotionally bankrupt.
Is that something that has been coming up in your research? Like people that you've been talking to, like the alternatives they've been seeking out if they have stepped away from Eurovision over the last couple of years?
Yeah, there are a few different things people have been doing. I think the main one is pivoting to national finals. So that's something I've been hearing people talk about since 2024. There were quite a few people who are like, I'm just going to step back this year. I'm just going to enjoy the national finals. And when it comes to May, I'm going to tap out and pursue one of my other interests or touch some grass outside or whatever else sort of works for people. There are other alternative events that people are turning to. A lot of people, for example, go to local Palestinian activist organised events on the night of the grand final. There's a fun one in Helsinki that I've been to for the last 2 years. So that is a nice way to recreate the live music aspect and often the sense of community aspect that you get out of Eurovision. A few people do things like organise their own viewing parties and go back and watch old things. And that's where I think things like Eurovision Again and podcasts and stuff where people do deep dives into past Eurovision material have been really valuable, because we've got this archive of stuff that we can go back to that doesn't necessarily have to directly feed into the current promotion or financial support of the contest. So a lot of people have been turning to Eurovision adjacent material. But then there are also people who have switched off completely and turned to their other fandom interests, other music, other television. And then there are other people who are hanging in there and holding on to the hope that the contest will continue to, or will turn itself around and come back to the thing that they want it to be. And so there are lots of different ways of approaching it, I think.
That totally aligns with sort of like what we are doing in terms of like what are we going to be doing January through March. Like we are, like Mike and I are both very committed to national finals. Like that's been one of the great joys of getting into Eurovision for me. But also today, just like literally walking back from errands on my way back to my apartment, could hear through somebody's car that they were blasting one of Marina Sadi's songs.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'm like, all of a sudden, I'm like, that sounds like La 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 from her EP.
Huh.
There is like a Greek neighborhood over there. This person is probably Greek. That got me excited because she's had to reschedule her US tour and we were waiting for those dates. But that's something I get to do next spring.
Yeah, nice. Like at the Helsinki alternative event last year, I got to see Bashar Murad live and I was in the front row. It was extremely cool. Yeah. But I also still listen to old Eurovision music. I try not to listen to the Eurovision official playlists, but like the artists themselves from 2008 or whatever, you can go and listen to that music. You don't have to mention that they're from Eurovision if you don't want to. They're just like, Lordi is an independent band from Finland. Like it doesn't have to be associated with the contest if you don't want it to. So the things that people still love about Eurovision Eurovision doesn't have the monopoly on the things that we love about it, the community and the music and the camp entertainment factor. We can get those things elsewhere if we want to. And not everyone does want to, and that's also fine. And you can continue to navigate your relationship with Eurovision as people see fit. But those are some of the ways that people are trying to step back for the people who do want to step back. And it is, I think, possible to do so and to reclaim some of those emotions and experiences that we normally associate with Eurovision in other ways.
I think that's been one of the big challenges in thinking about how I want to engage with the contest at this point in time, where it's just so much of my pop culture diet is influenced or has some sort of connection in some way, and just like be taking the stance of being like, okay, cut out everything. It's like, I won't have anything to listen to. I don't know. I guess I could start reading again. But even then, it's just the relationships that I've made with people. Like there is that component to it. So it's like, okay, it can't really be like fully removed, but still acknowledging this, like, yeah, it just may not be in a state of growth for the next 12 months.
And I think this is a real problem with, or not a problem, this is a real pressure point for popular culture in general, is that because we live in a world that is unequal and violent and cruel things happen and there is racial capitalism and colonialism, there is a lot of suffering and a lot of cruelty, and we can't always fully separate ourselves from that cruelty. Like, it just sort of exists in the world, and sometimes the culture that we consume is part of that. It is because it's part of the world and we are part of the world. But then the tricky part is, like, sometimes we can extricate ourselves from that and we can say, I am choosing not to engage with this particular piece of culture. I am uncomfortable with an actor who's involved, or the particular commercial way that it is played out, or the particular political resonances that it has. All of those things are things we have to consider when we're choosing to consume certain popular culture or not. And fan studies scholarship deals with this question a lot. What do we do with our problematic faves?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's okay, I think, to say, look, this artist is separate from their work. Especially, I think it's a little easier to do if they're dead, for example.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, I really enjoy Jane Austen's books. I'm not going to accuse Jane Austen of not being woke, but like, she existed in an aristocratic society that in a lot of ways benefited from colonialism and slavery. That doesn't mean that she is intrinsically a horrendous person whose books should never be read again. It's something we should be aware of while we're reading them. But it doesn't necessarily detract from the way that I enjoy reading her books or the books of other authors from that kind of time period. Where it starts to get trickier, I think, is when the creators are not only still alive, but are still creating the material. So we have Eurovision is continuing to put on shows and push forward as if nothing is happening. Harry Potter fans have J.K. Rowling continuing to open more theme parks and computer games, and the play in the West End is still ongoing. So there's just a constant barrage of new material that is encouraging people to engage with it, and they're remaking the television show version of it. So there's just this constant pull trying to get you to come back, and where that gets tricky is that if you continue to consume that media, you are contributing financially to that franchise. And in turn, in the case of Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling is using that money to fund legal cases against trans rights. So that, for example, for me is a red line, because my contribution to that would be directly aiding harm. And it's something I know that I can choose to step back from. It's not something I can't separate myself from. Like, iPhones, for example, are made with minerals that are harvested in horrifically exploitative conditions in the Congo by often child laborers. But I can't easily not have a smartphone. It's not just iPhones, it's all smartphones. We can't get rid of those. So it's not such an easy thing to disentangle ourselves from. But I can choose to not buy new Harry Potter merchandise. So I think these are the kinds of negotiations people have to make when they're choosing how they engage with popular culture and what are our own personal red lines.
Coming from a U.S. perspective, as like a U.S. taxpayer, I have no say in how our taxes are used, and what we are complicit in. Yeah, that list goes on forever, and so it's just okay how to navigate that ethical landscape. And I think Eurovision is an interesting case because the financial aspect can be pretty dubious. Like, we're able to watch live streams through YouTube or through a broadcaster's channel. Like, we're not necessarily financially contributing to those live streams. The last time that I bought a Eurovision album, I think was for the 2021 contest. Like, it has been through streaming, or again, like going through YouTube to listen to the songs, watch the videos, watch performances. The last time that I went to Eurovision was in 2022. So like my financial contribution to the contest has been pretty minimal the last few years. But we're also producing this show, which is carrying some water for the contest. So it's an interesting landscape versus like Harry Potter, where it's just like, no, there is like a direct financial contribution that you are making to consume that content.
Well, yeah, like with the Harry Potter side of it, like the play is currently running in Boston right now. Like, as somebody who just like completely cut that out of my life a few years ago, it's been very heartwarming to see the number of emails I had been getting about, no, there are tickets still available, which means that I hope that for a lot of people, they are also having that question, but also having gone to the website, there are still plenty of people filling those seats. We did White Elephant gift exchange in my office last week.
Fun.
And by the end of that, I had ended up with a gift that was partially a Harry Potter hot chocolate set. Even though I did not purchase this, I'm just going to kind of leave this in the office. It doesn't really mean anything. But on the other hand, like, this is just not part of my life anymore.
Yeah, and I think talking to Eurovision fans, the word a lot of people have used over the last 2 years is uncomfortable. They are not comfortable engaging with anything to do with the contest that might condone the idea that Israel should be allowed to participate in the contest. And so people are using that feeling of discomfort to guide themselves towards whatever decisions they sort of want to make. A lot of people also speak about it specifically in terms of supporting the BDS campaign to boycott Israel, and that's not just a personal choice, that's a specific targeted campaign against the economy of a settler colony. So it's part of a larger movement, but within that, people justify how they make their own consumption choices a lot through the lens of what they're comfortable or uncomfortable with. And so for a lot of people, that means not voting, that means not listening to Israel's song. For an increasing number of people, that is starting to mean not just stepping back from engaging with Israel in the contest, but stepping back from the contest as a whole, because it is becoming increasingly clear that the contest and Israel's participation are inseparable from each other. They go hand in hand at this point, and so a lot of people are starting to say, this is too much for me, I can't be involved in this anymore, and I think that's entirely understandable.
One thing that had been in my head as we were prepping for our last news episode, Mike, is just like, yeah, part of the reason that it's become uncomfortable for me is that it's felt increasingly clear in the last couple of years that Israel is willing to burn down the institutional reputation of Eurovision and the EBU, like, just for a couple days of positive headlines about, we won the popular vote. They are more than happy to do that. So just like, that means I probably can't engage with the official contest anymore.
Yeah, I think we have to think about our enjoyment of the contest in the broader environment of both pink washing and art washing, and the enabling of that art washing by the EBU. So Israel has been engaging in this culture washing campaign for many, many, many years. That's why it joined Eurovision in the first place, by being able to sing on stage about like peace and queer values and inclusion and diversity. It gets to sort of present itself to the world as a state that believes in those values, while turning around and not applying to those values to occupied Palestine and to Palestinians. And so that's the whitewashing side of it. And Israel is not the only country that does that. We know that we've seen that, for example, with Russia before they were expelled, but we also see that in a more moderate version with countries like Finland and Australia and the UK. Australia presents itself as a very diverse and inclusive multicultural society. And of course it is demographically, and that's a good thing to aspire to, but it does also paint a very rosy portrait of what Australian day-to-day politics are actually like, especially for Indigenous people, especially for people with migrant backgrounds. And so all countries do a little bit of that, and then some countries take it to the extreme with the washing and the masking of things like genocide. But the other side of that coin is the fact that the EBU tolerates that. And It has for many, many years insisted that it is a non-political contest, but we have to think about the way that that claim that it's non-political is actually leaving the door open for countries that are clearly engaging in politics to do so through the blanket of being non-political, and the way that that provides cover for them to do that. And so as much as we love Eurovision and are really attached to certain songs or to the friends we've made along the way, it is increasingly difficult, I think, for a lot of fans to be able to separate their enjoyment from that broader environment, because it's just becoming so much more blatant than ever before. And the EBU is really like, it's not just an accident anymore. They're clearly sort of holding the door open for this type of behavior from countries like Israel in the first place.
I think we described it in our previous episode as the EBU is currently taking the path of most resistance in terms of how they're handling this.
Yeah, it's my job to study this, and I don't have an insightful comment for that. It's just frustrating because you can see what they're doing, but sorry, that's not well phrased.
No, I mean, we are currently living through this in a way where a couple years from now, it will be easier to see the patterns and to see how the outcome went. But like right now, we are kind of just in the thick of it.
Yeah. And one thing I think might be helpful at this stage is one thing I have learned from reading from other fan studies scholars who research these kind of problematic fandoms is how common it is for scholars to talk about this type of problem as a form of grief. So a lot of people who were intensely invested in something that then turns out to not represent the values that they thought it did, and they have to decide to step back themselves, that is frequently described as a type of grief. And it's okay, I think, for fans to sit with those feelings and just be sad that the thing that they love isn't the thing that they love anymore. And I think it's important to hold a little bit of perspective on that grief, because at the end of the day, the reason that these problems are happening at Eurovision are because Israel is committing genocide in Palestine, and the EBU is allowing it to continue to behave as a normal state on the international stage. And that is where all of these other problems with the voting, with the way that Martin Green is writing these condescending messages to fans, to the way that artists are being treated, all of that is flowing from the same problem. And so I think we should keep the suffering of Palestinians and the fight for ending the genocide and occupation in the forefront of our minds when we're thinking about why certain things are happening and why we might want to step back from the contest. But at the same time, it is also fine to recognize that it sucks for us and that it's sad, and to process those feelings and take your time to process those feelings. This is something else that comes out of the fan studies research, is it takes people a while to reset and to let go. And that is because of the grief part of it. Grieving processes take time. And so I think if people aren't totally sure what to do with themselves at this point, it's only been a couple of weeks and it's all still very raw, and it will take time, and it's fine to know that and sit with it for a while.
Absolutely. Like I've been trying to read up on like particularly like fandom and grief, because grief is immediately where my mind went as well. It's kind of analogous to a breakup, and like however long that relationship is, I mean, it's just like, if it was just like a 1 month thing, yeah, you're probably not going to grieve that long. But like, I've been covering Eurovision for 15 years. So like that's a lot to unpack. And even that, it's not like it's a full divorce at this point. It's just like, no, we're just in kind of a rough patch, like trial, separation, that sort of thing. But it's still a lot, and it's a lot to process. And I think just for me, the way that it is kind of permeated throughout my life is like making it that much more difficult. I was not really much of a Harry Potter fan. I think I've read the first 4 books, but like book 3 was maybe like after that came out, book 4 like 10 years ago or something. So there was like a pretty long gap in there, but that was like something that was fairly easy for me to drop. But it's with this, it's just like, no, this is how I've like met a lot of my friends. It's how Ben and I met. Like, it was purely through Eurovision stuff. And what has come out of that is like, oh, trivia and this podcast and a whole bunch of other things were outgrowings from the Eurovision piece of it. So I don't know where I was going with that. It's just me rambling because I'm grieving. So, yeah.
Well, and like, no, that's like thinking about it as a breakup is just like, yeah, because like a lot of the emotions I've been feeling about this over like the last week or so have also felt like the last time I had like a major breakup after a multi-year relationship of like, oh, yeah, no, these are the exact same feelings. It's just very silly to be having them over a TV show, but they're still valid.
Yeah. But I don't think it is silly. I think, as I said before, we should keep the perspective in mind, but it is something that we get very attached to over a long period of time. Like, I decided to boycott in 2024, so I've had a bit longer to come to terms with this than perhaps you guys have. But at the same time, it's still my job. Like, I am entangled in it all day, every day, and it becomes, in the same way as being in a long-term relationship, other people start to see you through that relationship or through your fandom. And so I have to tell my lovely Finnish teacher that I don't want to talk about Eurovision in class, or like people at work are like, oh, this must be so interesting. And I'm like, it's not interesting. It's hard work. And those attachments run really deep, and it's very hard to let go of them. And it's okay, I think, if that takes a while, because it is kind of like a breakup.
From a fan media perspective, I've been thinking a lot the last week just because Mike and I, after this summer, have been in like essentially like a little small Discord. There's a lot of other fan media creators. Getting to see that space where everybody is sort of processing this has been very helpful. But then also just thinking a lot about all of the other fan media outlets in the last week that have been on Blue Sky and talking about how we're pivoting, where for a lot of us, this is not like our livelihood, but it's made me think about the ones where like, no, this is like a lot of their bread and butter.
And one thing that came up in interviews and focus groups, especially in 24, because I spoke to a few more fan media people that year, just through a fluke of recruitment demographics, is that people have been thinking about that for a while. And so there are some people from the broader fan media and the broader fan community as a whole who have already done that and have already stepped back or pivoted. So there are examples to turn to, but I do think if you are making a livelihood out of this kind of work, it is hard to step back entirely and just say, right, I'm not doing any of this. But I don't think that necessarily means it's impossible to change the way that you relate to the contest. And a lot of people have talked about altering the way that they engage with their analysis, what they sort of focus on, whether they choose to engage with Israel or not, whether they choose to engage with other aspects of the contest or not. Even for people who continue to engage with the contest in whatever form they want to, there are these ongoing conversations about what that will look like, because I think there's a fairly broad consensus that whatever that looks like, and I don't think anyone really knows yet, but whatever it looks like, it won't be what it has been. And I think in the future, the contest will be different. And a lot of people have said things along those kind of lines. They're not sure how it will be different. Something has changed a little for a lot of people.
Do you have any advice on what fans can do? Like, I'm thinking this is dropping like right before New Year's, and people are probably thinking of like New Year's resolutions, New Year, new me, like what they could consider doing January 1st.
I think we can look to what other fandoms have done for an answer to this, maybe, because unfortunately there are a lot of fandoms that have had to deal with problematic faves in this kind of way. So we have a fair amount of material to turn to. That's not a great comment on the state of the world, but for this specific purpose is maybe useful. So I think, to return to the Harry Potter example, I think the one thing that a lot of people have done through Harry Potter is turn to alternative sources like fan fiction, because that is a space where a lot of people feel like they can take the parts of Harry Potter that they loved and play with them themselves. And I think that is a really important thing to be able to do for personal grieving processes, for being able to like let go of it gradually. It's like looking at photos of your ex. You sort of do that intensely for a few days and then gradually do it less and less as you start to like re-enter the world on the other side. From a broader political perspective, I would be careful about the way those kind of alternative engagements resonate beyond your personal engagements with it. There's quite a lot of discussion amongst fan studies researchers, but also amongst the fandom themselves with Harry Potter, whether those kind of fan fiction creations are actually just keeping Harry Potter in the public eye and maintaining its conversation. And I don't have a clear answer about whether it is or not, but it is something to think about as people do start to look for alternative ways of engaging with the contest or alternative fandoms altogether. For better or worse, no matter how we engage with the world, we are entangled in its suffering. That doesn't mean we should say, oh, well, like everything is terrible. We can just engage with whatever we want. And it doesn't mean we shouldn't ever watch any popular culture at all. It just means we have to move through the world with caution, I guess, and think about the broader implications of what we do on the people both immediately around us, so our friends and our family and our fan communities, and people further away who we can't necessarily immediately see. And so that's one thing I think to consider. But on the other hand, what we also see from fans in other fandoms who step back from things, football fans, for example, are really struggling at the moment with like the exorbitant cost and the commercialization of Premier League and World Cup level football. And so what a lot of football fans are doing is just returning to their local communities and going to local football games. That's much cheaper, so financially a win, but also a really nice place to rekindle people's love of the game, because it is just people who are there to play and they're not there for sponsorship deals or whatever. They're just there for football. And so maybe if people are casting around looking for something to replace Eurovision or to distract them from Eurovision as they process it, I think turning towards local music scenes is a really nice way to take those first steps, because Eurovision, we sort of put so much emphasis on international music scenes and other people's cultures, and that is fantastic, and there are ways to still engage with that without having to go through Eurovision to get it, if that's what people want to do. But local music industries also are struggling a lot under like general capitalist conditions. And so if there are local gigs in your community, like go to them, because I personally am not a large crowds person. So I would gladly go to a gig that has 100 people at it over a 10,000 person arena event any day. And also it'll only cost $10 to get in instead of $1,000. So
yes.
So that would be my kind of New Year's resolution, is to maybe invest a little more energy in local music.
I really like the local music angle from my end. Like, part of what has been so wonderful for me about Eurovision is that even though we are all coming from different cultures, the way that pop music sort of connects us all. And one thing that I found through Eurovision, really enjoyed what Finland has been doing the last couple of years. Like, I started watching Vainalama this year because Karja was on it, and then discovered how wonderful the rest of the show is. And I've been diving into a bunch of different artists' back catalogs. So just like little things like that, or just like what is the other music programming? Where else can you find out, like, if international music is your thing? How can you dive into those other cultures? Like, that has also been really rewarding for me.
Vainalama is fun, especially going back into sort of older era Finnish music. It's good for that kind of thing. If I could add one more thing that people could do, this advice will not be applicable to everyone. This is something that people have to decide for themselves whether they want to or not. One thing that came out of my research talking to a lot of fans is that there's a lot of political energy and people want to do more but are not quite sure where to go to start. There were a lot of people who spoke about wanting to boycott or supporting the boycott, but feeling like they're just one person and it wouldn't make much of a difference. And so I think for people who are feeling that kind of sense that whatever they do isn't making a difference, a useful New Year's resolution is to maybe start practicing thinking about the ways that it does make a difference and the ways that you can do more if that's where you want to direct your energy. And so some people will want to focus on like their personal emotional attachments and the way that they're processing that grief, but other people might want to channel that energy into the wider political cause, because at the end of the day, the reason that Eurovision is struggling like this is because a country is committing genocide on its watch. And so pouring some energy into the wider BDS movement, so not necessarily boycotting Eurovision, but boycotting other Israeli products, is a useful way to sort of start doing that, or going to some local demonstrations, or it doesn't necessarily even have to be BDS or other Palestinian activism. It can be other forms of local community activism, just like local community gardens or anything that you think might sort of make a slight difference in the world, no matter how small, can be a nice place to sort of channel some of that energy, and also find some alternative community if that's what you're looking for as well. So that's another option.
Let this radicalize you rather than lead you to despair.
Yeah. And I think hope is a really important thing to hold on to. And when I was speaking to people in July, a lot of people were still saying, I've got a lot of hope that the EBU will come right and everything will be fine. I would hate to think that that hope was completely squashed by what's happened over the last few weeks. It's good to be disappointed. It's good to be angry, I think, but we shouldn't lose sight of hope, because hope is what keeps you attached and keeps you fighting. It gives you energy to do something else. I hope that people will keep hoping.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us to talk about this. And I'm finding this to be a really helpful conversation to continue with the processing of what has happened over the last few weeks. Zoe, is there anything that you would like to plug or point our listeners to?
Yeah, I would say if people want to find out more about the Eurovisionaries Project as a whole, they can go to the website www.eurovisionaries.com, or they can follow my increasingly pathetic social media presence at Eurovisionary on Instagram and at Zoë Charlotte Jay on whatever is left of Twitter.
That's going to do it for this episode of the EuroWhat. Thanks for listening. The EuroWhat podcast is hosted by Mike McComb, that's me, and Ben Smith.
That's me. You can find our full archive of episodes on our website at EuroWhat.com. Coming up, the EuroWhat AV Club will be celebrating the Taskmaster New Year's treat featuring the UK's Sam Ryder. You can join the club and access all of our bonus episodes at patreon.com/EuroWhat.
Next time on the EuroWhat, Moldova and Malta are getting ready for their national song selections, and we'll preview their processes and entries.